The courier came up the salt road at mid-morning with 2 outriders behind him and a leather tube under his arm. And Captain Edrin Mallow saw the red wax on it from the parapet and knew at once it was a writ he would not be able to obey. He came down the stair without hurry. He was 42, captain of Hollowford Keep on the Mart's Edge, the easternmost spike of the king's border, a stone elbow wedged between the salt road and the village of Hollowend below it. 210 men under his command. 3,400 souls in the village. The keep had stood for 90 years. Edrin Mallow had served at its gate for 16 of them. The courier did not dismount. The wax on the tube was the lion and crown. That was the king's own seal, not the marshal's, not the Lord Steward's. The king had signed it himself. Captain Mallow, the courier said. He was a young man, polite, a son of some inland house, his collar still dust-stiff from the road. By the king's hand, to be opened in your presence and read aloud. Edrin nodded. He did not invite him in. The courier broke the seal, unrolled the writ on his saddle pommel, and read. The writ said that the village of Hollowend, having harbored one Borrick of the Salt Cross, a fugitive accused of seditious conspiracy against the crown, was to be cleared by the king's order. The men of the village executed at the keep wall by the end of the day. The women and children sent inland by sundown. The houses burned, the wells filled. The captain of Hollowford Keep was named to carry it out with his garrison, under penalty of his own life and the dishonor of his house. The outriders did not look at him. The young courier read the last line in a steady voice. Then he rolled the writ and held it out. The keep gate was open behind Edrin. From the village below, the morning bell rang for the 2nd hour. A baker's apprentice came up the cobbled lane with a basket of brown loaves for the gate watch. A child laughed somewhere in the lower lanes. Edron did not turn his head. Borrick of the Salt Cross is a tax clerk, Edrin said. He counted barrels for the sea-wall levy 6 summers ago. He had a quarrel with a crown collector over a missing weight. He has been in my prison for 11 days, awaiting the assize. The writ does not speak to that, Captain. No, Edrin said. I see that it does not. The courier waited. Edrin took the writ, read it twice himself, slowly, his eyes moving down the lines the way a man reads a sentence on his own brother. Then he rolled it neatly and handed it back. By the old clause, Edrin said. I refuse, courier. The courier blinked. He did not know the words. He was a young man. He had not been raised by a captain at a border keep. The old clause, Edrin said, is the 3rd statute of the border charter, signed by the 3rd king at the Cathedral of Ellenry, the autumn the walls were built. It binds every captain of a border keep to defend the souls inside his ark of stone from any standing peril, foreign or domestic. It requires a captain to refuse an order from the crown itself, if that order would compel him to put unarmed civilians under his protection to the sword. The clause was set down so that no king in fever, no minister in ambition, no forger in the chancellery, could ever turn a captain's garrison against the village it was raised to keep. It has been in the charter for 90 years. It has not been used once. I use it now. The courier's mouth opened and closed. You are refusing the king. I am refusing this writ, Edrin said. I am obeying the crown. Those are not the same. The old clause is the crown's own bond against itself. You will carry the words back as I say them. You will tell the chancellery that Captain Edrin Mallow of Hollowford Keep has invoked the 3rd statute against the writ of clearing in Hollowend, and has stood his garrison in defense of the souls of that village, pending a writ of review from the king in person. You will tell the chancellery that I will lay down my sword the morning the king rides to the keep and asks for it in his own voice. Not before. Not to a courier. Not to a captain of the royal guard come up the road with an arrest warrant. Not to any officer below the king. The courier's hand was shaking on his bridle. He was not a soldier. He had not been told this could happen. Write it down, Edrin said gently. I will sign it for you, so they cannot say you did not hear me clearly. He sent for parchment and quill and dictated the refusal in the gate-yard, calm, without temper. The courier wrote it in a clerk's hand. Edrin signed. When it was sealed with the keep's own wax, a small castle, and a crossed key, the courier mounted, turned his horse, and rode back the way he had come. Edrin turned to his sergeant Wendell Sark, 20 years in the saddle, scarred at the brow from the river border raid 8 summers ago, and said, Sound the watch bell. All hands. The bell rang. The garrison gathered in the inner yard. 210 men in red and gray wool, plain steel cuirasses over linen, long swords at their hips. They fell into ranks the way Edron had taught them. The standard of Hollowford to keep a black hawk on a gray field hung still on its pole. He read them the writ. He read them his refusal. He told them, plainly, that he had refused an order from the king's own hand, and that there would come, by the end of the week, or sooner, a senior captain of the royal guard from the inland barracks with a warrant for his arrest, and that the king's marshal would come behind that captain with 3 companies of cavalry to lift the keep open and finish what the writ had begun. "I will not order you to stand with me," Edron said. "The old clause is mine to invoke. The penalty, if the writ is upheld in review, is mine to bear. Any man whose oath is to the writing of the king and not to the spirit of the charter, take off your colors and walk out the lower stair. You will not be marked. You will be paid through the end of the month from the keep's chest. Decide now." He stepped back. He waited. Nobody moved. Sergeant Sark spoke first. "Captain, there are 3,400 people in the village." "Yes," Edron said. "And one of them is the priest who buried my son." "Yes." "Then I am at the gate, Captain. I will be at the gate when the writ-bearer comes." The corporal beside Sark stepped forward and laid his hand flat on his sword pommel. The next man did the same, and the next, until the whole of the inner yard had moved together, 210 right hands on 210 sword grips. Nobody spoke. The black hawk on the gray field began, very slowly, to lift in the wind. Edron did not let his face show what was behind it. "To the wall," he said. "Bar the lower gate. Open the village gate. Send the runners to the elders. Bring the wagons up to the keep yard. We will not put the village under the sword. We will not let them be taken by the road. They come inside our arc of stone, or they do not move. Move." The next 2 days the keep did not sleep. The villagers came up the cobbled lane in a long, unbroken line, old women with linen sacks, men with hay-forks, mothers with children on their hips, a boy leading a donkey loaded with the schoolhouse books. Edron walked among them. He stood at the village gate himself and counted every soul through, by the lamplight, until past the second watch. 3,407. He wrote the count in the keep's day book in his own hand. The tax clerk Boric of the Salt Cross was brought from the prison. He was a small man with thin shoulders and ink under his fingernails. Edron did not free him. He brought him into the day room. "You are still a prisoner of the keep, Master Boric," he said. "You are still under writ of assize. You are not, however, a man I will hand over to be killed without trial. When the senior captain comes for me, you will go with him. You will have counsel, witnesses, your weights audited, your accuser brought into the room. That is what the crown owes you. That is what I will hand you toward." The little tax clerk nodded. He was crying, quietly. Edron put a cup of water beside him and let him sit. By the third morning, the senior captain of the Royal Guard rode up the Salt Road with 30 men in the burnished cuirasses of the inland barracks and a writ of arrest in his belt. His name was Captain Velen Orston. He had taught at the same academy where Edron had once taught the bayonet. Edron knew his face from a long way off. Orston came alone to the gate. His men stayed back. He looked at the standard on the pole, and at Holliford's red and gray on the parapets, and at the village wagons inside the gate, and the bakery cart, and the schoolhouse books stacked under canvas in the yard. "You have invoked the old clause," he said. "I have. You have stood your garrison in defense of an unwarranted clearing." "I have. You have refused the king's own writ." "I have refused the writ as written. I have stood by the crown's own bond against itself." Orston looked at him a long moment. Then he dismounted and let his bridle fall slack into the dust. "I have read the old clause this week, Edron, twice. I rode here meaning to put you in irons for sedition. I will not. I will carry the writ of refusal to the marshal myself, and I will testify before the Privy Council that the captain of Holliford Keep invoked a clause of the charter that has lain unused for 90 years, and that he invoked it cleanly, by the book, without rebellion in his speech." He looked past Edron into the yard. "Is the tax clerk Boric here?" "He is." "I will take him to the assize. He will go in my carriage, not the prisoner cart. He will have counsel of his choosing. I swear it on my colors." Edron bowed his head, the smallest possible bow, the kind a captain gives a captain. Then he sent for Boric. Orston rode out at midday with the tax clerk in the carriage, and the writ of refusal in a leather tube. He left 20 of his 30 men inside Holliford's gate, formally in token of the Privy Council, but truthfully because he did not want Holliford to face the marshal alone. Sergeant Sark watched the carriage go and crossed himself. The marshal's 3 companies came on the 6th day. They came at dawn, in good order, 300 horse and 100 foot, banners up. They stopped a quarter-mile from the lower gate. A herald rode forward. He read the king's order, that the captain of Holliford Keep was to surrender his command, his colors, and his sword to the marshal at once, on pain of summary execution under field statute. Edron sent his answer back by the same herald, in writing, signed. He wrote, "The captain of Holliford Keep has invoked the 3rd statute of the Border Charter against the original writ of clearing. The matter is before the Privy Council. Until the council rules, the captain will not yield his sword to any officer below the king. He will yield it the morning the king rides to the keep and asks in his own voice. His garrison will lay down arms in the same hour, by the same hand. Until then, the gate is closed. The herald rode back. The marshal did not advance. Inside the gate, the men of Hollowford stood at the wall and waited. Edrin rotated the watches every 4 hours. He carried bread to the parapet himself. He stood beside Sergeant Sark through the long gray afternoon, and once, almost smiling, he said, "We are very small, Wendell. We are very small, Captain. We are also very right." The marshal's 3 companies camped on the Salt Road for 9 days. On the 10th day the king came. He came up the road in plain travel gray, with 6 men of his household guard and no banners. He had ridden from the inland in 7 days, faster than the courier of an order. He stopped his horse at the gate of Hollowford Keep, at the same flagged stone where the courier had stood 23 days before, and he sat in the saddle while a young man in the king's household colors unrolled the Privy Council's ruling and read it aloud. The council had held the writ of clearing of Hollow End to have been issued under duress and forgery, 3 signatures on the original margin, proven false by the chancellery's own clerks, the seal pressed by a die-cast, not held by the king, and had quashed it. The council had held the invocation of the 3rd statute of the Border Charter by Captain Edrin Mallow of Hollowford Keep to have been lawful, timely, and in the spirit and the letter of the charter. The council had held the captain's garrison to have done its duty by the crown, and by the souls in its ark of stone. The reading ended, the king dismounted. He walked through the gate alone. He came up to where Edron stood with Sergeant Sark a pace behind him, and the standard of the Black Hawk lifting above. The king was 62 years old, a small gray-bearded man with tired eyes, who had lost a son the year before to the same border fever that had killed Edrin's wife. "Captain Mallow," the king said. His voice was steady. "I have come in my own voice to ask you for your sword." Edrin drew the longsword from his hip. He laid it across both his palms, the way a captain laid his blade for an inspecting king. He held it out. The king did not take it. He laid his own gloved hand flat on the steel, briefly, and pushed it gently back toward Edrin. "Keep it, Captain," he said. "You will need it at the wall. The charter requires me to come and ask. It does not require me to take. You will tell your sergeant to stand the garrison down. You will tell the village they may go home." He paused, and his tired eyes met Edrin's without flinching. "And you will know, in the years that follow, that an old clause that lay sleeping for 90 years stood between my crown and a wrong it almost did, because a captain at a border keep had read the book and was willing to be hanged on the word of it." Edrin did not trust himself to speak. He nodded once. He sheathed the sword. He turned to Sergeant Sark and said, quietly, "Stand them down, Wendell. Stand them down. Let the village go home." The bell rang. The garrison stepped back from the wall in good order. The villagers gathered their bundles and their children and walked back down the cobbled lane in the same long, unbroken line, slower now in light rain. The schoolhouse books were carried back under canvas. The baker's apprentice took up his basket. The donkey was led down by the same boy. By dusk, the village was sleeping in its own beds again, and the keep was sleeping in its own walls, and the standard of the Black Hawk hung still on its pole as if nothing in the world had happened. The old clause went back into the charter. It would not be invoked again in Edron Mallow's lifetime. But every captain of a border keep, for the rest of the century, learned its words by heart on the morning he took his post, because an order signed by the crown could be lawful, and one signed by the crown could be wrong, and the difference belonged not to the captain's anger, but to the slow, patient work of the book and the man who would stand on it. Edrin Mallow stood at his post the next morning, in the same plain steel cuirass, at the same stone gate, and watched the Salt Road empty in the dawn light, and he understood at last what the third king had meant when he set his name to the clause, 90 years before, that the freest man in any kingdom is not the one who is permitted to do as he pleases, but the one who is bound, by oath and by clause and by his own hand on the gate, to do what is right. The bell rang for the 2nd hour. The baker's apprentice came up the lane with a basket of brown loaves. Captain Edrin Mallow turned to meet him, and the morning went on.